Morning. Welcome to Becerra de Meneses. Today is Sunday, May 20th. You're all welcome. All know or should like that. Becerra de Meneses is the non-profit practice charity. 547 at spirit.com. Our podcast is 24. And just go into radio.spiritis.com and click on your program of your choice. It's free and it's a great way to those that don't come to class to learn. Very, very interesting subjects, over 500 of them. Today we're going to be reading from our book, Our Daily Bread. This book was written by Francisco Candido Javier and it was dictated by the Spirit of Emmanuel. We'll be talking about chapter 87, Always Ponder. And the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, and trust to reliable men who will also be qualified to teach to others. This was said by Paul in Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. The disciples of the gospel in Christian Spiritism often display uncontrollable enthusiasm, anxious to extend and express a renewed, contagious, and ardent faith. However, such a mental activity requires extreme caution, not only because astonishment and admiration do not really mean interior evolvement, but also because it is indispensable to understand the spiritual qualities of the terrain. Power of knowledge is to be transmitted. Naturally, we are not referring to the actual dissemination of the revealing truth, nor to the manifestation of fraternal kindness. That is implied through our natural obligations in our righteous actions. Excuse the accent. We emphasize the need for each brother to watch over the patrimony of spiritual gifts received from the superior plane so that the celestial values are not relegated to evil or to ignorance. Let us disperse the light of love to our companions in the journey. However, let us defend our intimate sanctuary against the thrust of ignorance. Let us remember that the Master himself reserved different teachings for the popular masses and for the small community of students. He did not include all the disciples in the transfiguration of the Tabor, and in the Last Supper, he waited for the absence of Judas in order to comment on the anguish that was to follow. It is important to place attention on those attitudes of the Christ, bearing in mind that not everything is destined for all. The noble spirits that communicate on earth always adopt a selective criterion, seeking out the honorable and faithful individuals that are suited to teach others. If those spirits who are already able to identify problems with illuminated vision act prudently in that regard, then how much more vigilant should the pupil be who only sees with the physical eyes? Let us work for the benefit of all, extending fraternal arms, but understanding that each person has his own step in the infinite scale of life. Beautiful words. And in the reflecting about today's reading, in explaining Paul's verse, Emmanuel advises us to use extreme caution when we anxiously display our strong and ardent faith to others, and the need to understand and analyze first the conditions of the territory where our knowledge is to be transmitted. We can disseminate the revealing truth, the manifestation of fraternal kindness, and the light of love to those who accompany us in our journey, always remembering that the Master himself had different teachings for the popular masses and for the small community of students. Let us work for the benefit of all, keeping in mind that each person has his own step in the infinite scale of life. And to begin today's gospel, um, if you help me out with a little prayer to begin today's gospel, let's take a deep breath. Let's close our eyes if you want to. Relax on that chair and elevate our thoughts to the Almighty. And let's thank Him. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Once again, we're all here together to express our love and our gratitude to you. Thank you for another day, for another opportunity to look at what we did yesterday and try to do better today and even better tomorrow. Thank you for our families, our friends, our jobs, and the roof over our heads. Dear Master, give us the wisdom to be careful and control our enthusiasm when expressing our faith to others, so that we can remember that each person is different and that each one has to take their own steps in the ascending ladder of life. Heavenly Father, we ask you to guide and protect the weak, those that are sick, those that are lonely, those that have not found you yet, those that suffer under governments that enslaved them, that oppress them and exploit them. We pray, dear Master, so that on one day only love and peace reign in our world. Finally, Heavenly Father, and to begin today's gospel, we ask you to enlighten our sister Janaina so that the words in her lips deliver the message from the gospel with the help of her mentors. And we ask you, dear Lord, also to open our hearts, but especially our ears, to listen, to learn, and to put in practice the teachings of the gospel. And with this word, dear Lord, we ask you permission to open today's gospel. And we ask you this in the name of your Son, Jesus. So be it. So be it. Thank you. And to begin today's gospel, we're going to have Janaina Machado. She's going to be talking about chapter 20, Workers of the Last Hour. Welcome.
I have some water. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So today I have a special guest with me, my mother. She does not speak English, but she will listen to me. And um, I would like to thank you for inviting me because it's always a pleasure to be here. So today's we're gonna be talking about the workers of the last hour. And one thing that I found pretty interesting when I was reading the gospel to prepare it, I've always thought about how Kardec, with the spirits, put together the information. So I always pay attention each chapter, you start and you have a passage from the Bible, and then you have the compilation of the messages that mediums all over received. And then after, they sort through, they got, that information. And then you have the spirit's teachings. And while I was reading this book, I realized that chapter 20th is the only chapter in the whole gospel that goes straight to the Spirit's teachings. And then I thought there must be a reason for it, even though it's not a long chapter, but I believe it's probably one of the most important. And I don't think we pay much attention to it. So we're going to be going over the Spirit's teachings. The last shall be first, the mission of Spiritists, workers of the Lord. So that I thought was interesting. And then I also brought some, because when I was thinking about it, I don't know why, but I did it anyway. I had a few more slides, but I deleted. I only kept, I guess, two or three that were not are not from the subject. But I thought about you guys have the gospel every Sunday, which is amazing because nowadays we don't see that very often, like you follow the gospel each Sunday you have. And while I was reading the introduction of the gospel, the number one, the objective of this work, so of the gospel, everyone admires gospel morality. Because the gospel, we can find 5 points that throughout history people could focus on. So Kardec made sure to let us know that the part that we are going to focus is the morality. So everyone admires gospel morality. Everyone proclaims its sublimity and necessity. But many do so based on what they heard said about, or the faith originating from a few maxims that have become proverbial. However, few know it in depth, and even fewer understand it, know how to deduce its consequences. And so I went and looked it up, the word deduce. So arrive at a fact or conclusion by reasoning. Draw as a logical conclusion. So here we have the gospel, and the invitation for us is not only to come and sit here and listen to. It's, to be involved, to when you are listening to the one who's talking, it's always important. I always think if I leave and nobody has a single question, or if, then we didn't do the job, because Spiritism, it's not like other religions where you just sit down and listen to. Together we work. So we come and do the presentation, but it's a mutual, it's a exchange of information. And so they also continue to say in the gospel citations, which is the first part of the each chapter, we have preserved everything that has been useful for the development of the thought. So again, about thinking, reasoning, eliminating only matters that are irrelevant to the matter at hand. So the essential objective was to put it within reach of everyone by explaining obscure passages and developing other consequences with a view to applying them to the various situations of life. So whenever we're reading the gospel, you know, it it was made so everybody could read it, and then it explains the passages, and it gives us examples on how we can apply to the daily lives. And then today we're talking about the workers of the last hour, and it starts with a parable. And then, as a supplement to each precept, we have added certain teachings, which I said, it came from different spirits from mediums in many countries. But this was what really spoke to me when I read the introduction. The Spirit's teachings are truly voices from heaven that have come to enlighten humans and invite them to practice the gospel. So this chapter, it goes straight to the Spirit's teachings. There must be something for us in here that it's very important. And if I am not able to really, get you to think about it, I would love for you to read the gospel and see what it speaks, to you. So, uh, can I? Oh, better. Thank you. Because it was kind of dark. So we're going to start talking about the parable of the father of the vineyard. The kingdom of heaven is like the father of a family who went out at daybreak in order to hire workers to work in his vineyard. Having agreed with the workers that he would pay them 1 denarius per day, he sent them to the vineyard. He went out again at the third hour of the day, and seeing others who were in the square not doing anything, he said to them, "You go also to my vineyard, and I will give you what is reasonable." So with the first ones, he said, "I will pay you 1 denarius." The second ones and the next ones, what's reasonable? Because one started at the first hour and then the others came along. Again, he went out at the sixth and ninth hours of the day and did the same. And having gone out at the 11th hour, he found others who were without anything to do and said to them, "Why have you stood around all day without working?" They told him that it was because no one had hired them. He then said to them, "You too go to my vineyard." So we have different people that were asked to come and work at different times of the day. So maybe I will do a little thing just so we can kind of picture in our mind, maybe how this father of a family was thinking. So let's use, can I use you, Leo, as an example? So let's say Leo, is the boss and he has a business. And then he went out to look for people to work. And then he offered, I don't know, what do you guys think it's a reasonable pay for a day worth of work? 80, 100. Well, let's say 100. So he offered, I don't know if I wrote later, the number, but anyway. So he offered 100 for the first. And then for the second one, he said, "I'll pay what's reasonable." And then the ones who started really did, the heavy work because they were doing all that work. And then, so if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people here. Let's say that each person was called at a different hour. But let's say that the 3 people on the back were called first. And then the 3 on the front, called later. And then mom was called, like at the last hour, let's say. So Leo offered $100. And then, okay, the girls are happy. But then the next one comes and they also get $100. So how do you feel about it? Knowing that you started at the first hour, 7 a.m., and then a mom who came to work at 5 o'clock got $100 too. How do you feel about it? Do you think it's fair? Do you think it's not? Or why it's not? Or why, yeah, it is? Okay. So here I made a timeline because when I read, the passage, I thought, okay, I got a picture in my mind, the day out. So I started at 6 a.m. being daybreak when he went out. And then 9 a.m., it's the third hour, 12 o'clock, the sixth hour, 3 o'clock, the ninth hour, and 5 o'clock, the 11th hour. And then after, the day was gone, uh, when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the one who was taking care of his business. So we would say it's Claudia, that was called to come and pay the people. Call the workers and pay them from the last to the first. Thus, those who had not come to the vineyard except when the 11th hour was near received 1 denarius each. Those who were hired first came in their turn, believing they would be given more. But each one received no more than 1 denarius. Upon receiving it, they complained against the father of the family, saying, this last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who bore the load and heat of the day. So before I go on, to the next, which will be the conclusion, I found a few things interesting here. So the first was when he called the first one, he said, I will pay 1 denarius, and they accepted. The others accepted, but they didn't know what they were going to get paid, but they went anyway. And the ones who were the last called, they were not there doing nothing because they were just being lazy. They didn't have a chance. Nobody hired them. And for the boss, that was so important because he knew that those people were there doing nothing, but not because they were lazy. Oh, let's wait until the end of the day, and then I worry about, the bread and milk. And when they pay, when the person who's in charge to pay pays everybody, the ones who were called first now are feeling that I will say, my how I see, I would think that they are feeling less than the others, and because they even say have made them equal to us. Like, so when they say equal to us, does that mean that they are worth more? So does that mean that the father is not a reasonable person? And then the father said, but in response, he said to one of them, my friend, I have done you no wrong. Did you not agree with me on 1 denarius for a day's work? Take what belongs to you and go. As for me, I wish to give to the last as much as to you. It is not permitted to me to do what I want. And is your eye evil because I am good? And then I was like, ooh. So bringing that back, to Leo being the boss now, sometimes we do that and we don't even realize, because we do that even maybe in the Spiritist center, at the work, at the house, with our family, but we do in different ways. So whenever we think that Whoever got promoted does not deserve, we're doing the same thing. But the Father says, is your eye evil because I am good? Because the Father knows, he sees through. We can fake, you know, brush our hair and pretend we're good, but the Father sees everything and he knows our intention. So this parable, it's so important because it not only asks for us to take responsibility on our work, but also not to envy our brother and sister, their work that they're doing, even if we think that they should not have it or that they don't deserve because they don't work as much, they don't study as much. Why are they getting paid more? So this is a very important question. But so we can understand who are the workers of the vineyard, on the item 3, I used the same timeline, but now I changed a little bit. Okay. So daybreak to the 3rd hour, uh, it says that those workers are from Abraham to Moses, the prophets, and all initiators who marked the stages of progress. So the first ones called started back, because when we say Moses, we always think Moses is the one who started, believing in one God. No, Abraham started, and then throughout, some centuries, Moses came along. So they are the first ones. Then at the 6th hour, we have when Jesus came, and then after he's gone, we have so all of this on the bottom is one paragraph. I just divided, and then the 15th hour and the 17th, because now we're like the 17th hour, just about the days ending. So Moses and all the prophets from the first hour. Middle of the day, we have Jesus, the apostle. And I thought it was so interesting that they write down. So Moses, prophets, and all initiators who marked the stages of progress that has been continued down through the centuries by apostles, martyrs. How do you say that? Martyrs. Okay. The church fathers, learned individuals, philosophers. So it's not only the apostle, but all the ones, because we inherit all that knowledge. We're not here today because, I'm the worker of the last hour. No, we inherit. And guess what? We were there on the first hour. We were there on the second. And we're back. So, and finally, spiritists. Spiritists last to arrive. And then after, this, we have the last shall be first, because on the parable, the last ones received their wages first and the same as the other. So workers of the last hour have a right to their wages, but their willingness has to have put them at the disposal of the master who was to hire them. And their tardiness must not have been the result of laziness or ill will. They have a right to their wages because since daybreak, they had been waiting impatiently for someone who would finally call them to work. They were hardworking, they only lacked work. So that's interesting. So here we have this beautiful Spiritist center who is around 34 years? How long? It's been 34? Since, yeah. So 33 years. And if we think about all the people that came, when it was first opened, but when we talk about the people, we're talking about the spirits. Imagine how many hundreds, thousands of spirits have been helped. And then after being helped, they reincarnated. They came to work. Some may still be here. Some are still coming. So whenever we're called to work, that's our time. And good spiritists, my dearly beloved, when I was reading this, because it's from Constantine, a protector spirit, I was reading as if I could hear the voice, because it talks straight to spiritists. Good spiritists, my dearly beloved, you are all workers of the last hour. The one who says, I begin work at daybreak and I will finish only at nightfall. Because again, we were the ones from the first, the mid of the day, and now we're back. So we begin the work at daybreak and we are still here working. Would be very proud. You all came when you were called, some a little earlier, some a little later, to the incarnation whose shackles you bear. However, for how many centuries has the Lord been calling you to his vineyard without your wanting to enter it? Because here's another point. Sometimes we are called and we always have an excuse. So, right now, talking about today, every spiritist center has its difficulties. Whether it's finding people to work, whether it's maintaining the house, because like our brother said, the house needs, we have to pay for the electricity. We don't charge for any of the spiritual work, but certain things are needed. And then the Lord has been calling us, because sometimes we are in here but we still don't want to go into the vineyard. So I hope that today, and this for me was like, there will be another slide where yesterday when I was reading, I cried because I felt like that was like straight to me. And sometimes it needs us to be called to do a talk, to study, to get the message that who needs actually is me. Now is the time for you to receive your wages. Employ the time you have remaining well. Employ the time we have remaining well. Sometimes I can talk for myself, with all the technologies, how many hours we spend doing nothing. I check Instagram at least 20 times a day. For what? But I do it. And then I check Facebook, maybe another 15. So if I took that time and got a book and read 3 pages, it would be much more worth. So, but it's necessary because we have to take control. We have to govern ourselves. When I was reading this yesterday, before I started to put in the computer, I made a prayer and I asked that I could be guided to do whatever the house needs, and especially what I need to see. So I opened the book Our Daily Bread, and I got the message 158. I don't remember the title, but the first line says, actually, the body is a miniature of the universe. How do you take care of it? And I'm like, Ooh, I could stop right here because it's the same thing. The Father is governing the whole universe, and we have a hard time to govern our own self. So when He invites us, He knows that we can do it. He knows we're capable of, but sometimes we don't believe we can, and that's hard. Because sometimes we're too harsh on ourselves, like, oh, I don't know if I can. Start doing little by little, one step at a time. I remember the first day I came here, my voice was like all mumbling, So then you start to know the people, you get the confidence, and then you feel that, oh, this is also my house. So when we come, it's like it's an extension of our home. So then he goes on, employ the time you have remaining well and never forget that your existence, no matter how long it may seem to you, is only a fleeting instant in the immensity of time comprising eternity for you. So this incarnation, whether you live a month or 115 years, it's only an instant compared to the eternity. And that was Constantine, a protector spirit. And then they go on. I'm going to jump this slide since we already spoke, that we already came on the first hour when we were called, and all the others, and now we're back. So, mission of the spirits. This part of the gospel is so interesting because it's like an incentive. It's almost like, when you need a Red Bull because you have to do something. I felt like that what it was, because they say, go forth. Like they give you the impulse, go forth and preach the new tenet of reincarnation, of the elevation of spirits, according to whether they according to whether they fulfilled their missions well or badly, and how they bore their earthly trials. So if we employ well our time, we will see how our life is going. But if we don't use the time so good, we also will notice. The time has come in which you must sacrifice your habits, labors, and futile concerns to its propagation. So, for the propagation of Spiritism, for the good news, go forth and proclaim it. So it's like, go for it, just don't sit around and wait for that great opportunity, because the great opportunity is now. You will proclaim disinterested, how do you say this big word, disinterestedness? Okay. To the greedy, abstinence to the dissolute, and kindness to the two domestic tyrants, as well as to despots. Waste words, I know. But what does it matter? You must water with your sweat the ground that you must sow, for it will not produce a crop except through repeated efforts of the evangelical hoe and plow. So even when we're talking to our family members, our friends, and sometimes we can talk about Spiritism without talking about Spiritism to people, to friends, to family members, because there are ways to, we can always find a point of interest, and then we can connect the dots. And like we said in the beginning, then the person has to think. But we are doing our part. Simple and unlearned men and women, your tongues will be loosened, and you will speak as no other orator speaks. So I'm like, oh, yes, you're called to do a talk. And then you think, oh, I don't know how to do it. Guess what? Your tongue will be loosened. Like you study, you do your part, you ask for guidance. When you're here, words starts coming to the mind. You have ideas of examples. They're here for us. Go forth and proclaim, and attentive people will joyfully take in your words of consolation, fraternity, hope, and peace. Press onward, magnificent phalanx. Is that phalanx? I had to look it up, the word, because I thought, what is that? So I guess it's like a phalange. Press onward, magnificent phalanx of faith, and the great tabellions of disbelievers will vanish before you like the morning mist at the first rays of the sun rising. So this first phrase was the one that actually made me cry, because I was reading this, and then when I got to that point, I was like, oh, thank God that was by myself, incarnates. May your phalanx be armed with resolution and courage. Get to work. The plow is ready. The soil awaits you. Now you must work. So they're calling for us to work. And when we talk about work, disseminating Spiritism, it does not mean that you have to be here in the front to do the work, because the house has so many needs. The person who prepares the water, who knows, maybe that person is listening so attentively to what we're saying that maybe if we would die together, maybe that person would have more light than the speaker. Because sometimes we talk, but we really don't uh, put into practice. Go forth and give thanks to God for the glorious task He has entrusted you. But bear in mind that among those called to Spiritism, many have gone astray. So watch your course and follow the way of truth. And that was from Erastus. So this second part is so important. So let's say that, using this house as an example, and I can use our Spiritist Center also. So you guys have 33 years of this Spiritist Center since it was open. Our Spiritist Center is 11 years old. And we notice that some people, they came, they studied, they started working, and then all of a sudden something happened. They started, before they would come for the studies, then, oh, I have to work, I can't come for the studies. And the next thing you know, they were gone. So, but it does not mean that we are not in danger, because if we don't watch out, it can happen to us too. So when they say, bear in mind that among those called to Spiritism, many have gone astray. So if we're doing something that sometimes maybe it's not so, that the house accepts, or the guide, the guidelines, we're all friends and we can talk. Because when we can't talk to each other working for Christ, then what are we doing? Are we on the same page or the same book? You know what I mean? Yep. So it's very important, but it's so hard. I learned a few years ago about being assertive. And that does not mean that I know how to be, but Sometimes I have to really use it. So, what does that mean? We need to talk about a subject, but it's not personal. So, we just talk about the subject. So, I don't hurt anybody's feeling, they don't hurt my feelings. It's about what needs to be done. And once we learn that, we understand that sometimes, we're so anxious or nervous that our words come out in the wrong way. And maybe we don't really mean that. So, whenever things happen, we can just take it easy, ask for some, how do I say, patience. I don't ask for patience anymore because I learned every time I ask for patience, things happening. So I have to practice patience. So I'm like, okay, let's pick something else. But at least so we can be, a friendly when we're talking. And then the workers of the Lord. The time is near for the fulfillment of those things proclaimed for the transformation of humankind. Blessed will be those who have worked in the Lord's field selflessly and with no other motive than charity. There is a question in the Spirit's book. I don't remember the number and I don't remember the question pretty much, but I know the answer. Okay. So uh, it asks, what is the biggest, I will use my words. And if I find out the, which question I'll give to Leo and he can pass on. But or even if you know, you can help me out. The question basically asks, so, what is the main cause of all evil around us? Or the things that really, even when we try, if we take out our imperfections? And then the answer is self interest. Because whenever we do something, whether it's charity or not, and we are doing because we have a self interest, that's not good. So here, blessed will be those who have worked in the Lord's field selflessly and with no other motive than charity. Come unto me, you who have been good servants. You have known how to silence your jealousies and discords so that no harm would come to the work. How hard is this? Because when we're talking about the vineyard, we can say, the Father is God, the vineyard is the universe, the workers is all of us. And then we can come into smaller, portions. We have the Spiritist Center as a vineyard, we have our work as a vineyard, but our family, I would say right now, is the most important vineyard. And sometimes we can't silence our jealousies. But the thing is, sometimes we don't even know we're being jealous. We have something that goes in, we just don't know how to name it. And discords so that no harm would come to work. And coming from a family where I am the only spiritist, I know how difficult it is sometimes when you have to, the discord part where you have just to be, just silence because no matter what you say, it's not going to change. But I learned something this week. I was watching The Secret. I have seen The Secret years ago. And for some reason this week, I was like, oh, let's watch The Secret. There was one point that they were saying, he said, okay, if you want to say you have bills to pay and then you worry about it. So every time you go to check your mailbox, bills are coming. So he said, okay, but even when you say, okay, I want money to pay the bills, he said, you should worry about the bills. So worry about being abundant because then things will fall into place. But one thing that caught my attention was they used an example of a man who was gay And every time he went to work or when he was at the supermarket, he would be picked on and he would be so mad. And then he came into contact with one of the people and they said, okay, you have to change the way you're doing everything wrong, because every time you say I hate these people, you're attracting more of these people. And then that came to my mind about, when you have a family member that does not agree with you. If you think about, oh, every time I see he's going to talk about it. Yes, he will, because guess what? I am sending the signal. Talk to me. So I thought, what am I going to do? I have to change. How do we do it? So it's another lesson to be learned, but I will work on it because I need. And then this is our last slide. At this moment, God is taking a census of his faithful servants and is taking note of those who only have the appearance of devotion, so that they may not usurp the wages of the courageous servants, because it is for those who do not recoil before their task that God will entrust the most difficult position in the great work of regeneration through Spiritism. So we're coming to a point where we are the workers of the last hour. And the last hour is coming. Our planet is changing from trials and expiation to regeneration. The last hour is here. So from the 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, this is the time we have. And let's work to make sure that we continue here, that we don't go to other places where we're going to have to help them to progress. So we are all invited, get this uh, chapter 20, read the mission of Spiritists. If that does not touch your heart, I don't know what will. Because definitely they invite you, they ask you. It's almost like they're begging. They're showing, here it is, you can do it. So I thank, you guys for inviting me, but most important, I thank God for allowing me to be here, to be part of this Spiritist movement, because I don't know what my life would be without it. I can't imagine, my life without it. So thank you so much, and let's be the ones working with no other interest than charity. Thank you. You want me to do prayer? Okay. Let's close our eyes. Think about God at this moment. If you want to imagine Him as a father, you can, or you can just think about Him as a higher power. He is right here, showing us that we are ready to work, inviting us. We have all the resources. Father, thank you so much for this incarnation, for all the spirits that are here, for the Spiritist movement in the United States. We ask for your blessings for all the brothers and sisters who could not be here this morning, and for the ones that are listening outside. Thank you so much. And we ask that you give us strength so we can continue the work we have started. Thank you, and so be it.